Hi everyone, my name is Kate McGough and I'm the head of portfolios for Nelson Primary. Welcome to Nelson Primary's first webinar of 2026. Our webinar is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Bunurong people, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. Please do revisit our past webinars from Nelson Primary. We've built a professional learning page that will enable you to watch the past webinars and hear from experts in your own time, and we'll put that link in the chat. Some housekeeping as well, just before we start. Please feel free to put questions and responses into the chat. We'd love that. We'll leave some time at the end of the session to respond to as many questions as we can. All right. I am delighted and excited to introduce Anna Burkey, CEO of Australia Reads. Australia Reads is the peak body for recreational reading in Australia, and under Anna's leadership and support, Australia Reads is dedicated to getting more Australians reading. If you haven't explored the Australia Reads website, please do so. We will also put that link into our chat. I was lucky to be introduced to Anna last year, and her infectious passion and enthusiasm for supporting Australian children and adults to start reading and continue reading was palpable and inspiring. And I wanted her to share her dedication and hard work with you all because, as educators, librarians, parents, carers, readers yourselves, you are all as passionate and dedicated as she is. So, today's session, drawing on the latest behavioural science insights, will unpack the factors that shape whether children want to read and continue to read as they grow. So, over to you, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you to Nelson Primary for inviting me to the first webinar of the year. It is a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to hearing from all of you in the questions towards the end of the session. So start thinking up some questions as we talk through much of the research and the findings about reading at the moment. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of reading and research and what works, a little bit about me further. As you may hear from the accent potentially, I'm not, Australia Reads is not run by someone who was born in Australia. I'm from Scotland. And I had the great fortune to grow up in Glasgow and Edinburgh, really a land full of stories. And then to have the opportunity to come here to Australia that has such an, this ancient and continuous storytelling history and heritage with First Nations storytelling that I've been very privileged to be welcomed and to begin to learn about over the last 15 years that I've been here in Australia. I've added these particular slides to show you that I have always been passionate about promoting and supporting reading and literature. And in that slide where you can see Edinburgh Castle in the distance there, what I am trying desperately to do is to prove that that is an actual projection of poetry, that it's not photoshopped. But I have realized in recent years it doesn't really prove anything because it could just be a deep fake that's been carefully made. However, at the time in 2010, this was very exciting. And what we were doing was looking at how we could make reading and stories and storytelling as visible to the public as possible in their city, in their community. And we ran this incredible poetry campaign called Carry a Poem, where we asked everyone to tell us the poetry they carried in their head, in their heart, on a card in their wallet, stuck to their fridge, what poetry chimed for them. And we started chalking poetry on the streets. Edinburgh's very lucky, there's actually poetry properly carved into the walls. We hired a projector for $50 and we started projecting stories and poetry onto the walls, onto the streets as commuters went down to the train station, to show in the dark February nights where the sun sets at 3 p.m. That we could bring alive the city with stories and with light. And what we did on Valentine's Day that year was to project this poem up there onto Edinburgh Castle. It took me 4 years to get permission to project onto Edinburgh Castle. So it was a very exciting night when we got to do it. And we chose this beautiful poem by the Scottish poet Douglas Dunn, Look to the living, love them, and hold on. And that image, the pure image, not the one with my hand in it, went round the wires that year as the Valentine's Day image on the front page of the BBC, of the New York Times. And there, which is fabulous to have that recognition, but more fabulous was what it did for the local community, the people that stopped and gathered and talked in the street about the poems that they loved. And one young man was even so inspired that he proposed to his girlfriend beneath that image. So I include this because it shows the absolute power without much money, without needing to do anything particularly big and fancy, the power that we can have by bringing words to the fore and making them visible so that people feel that they can take part in a conversation about stories. And then I ended up over here almost 15 years ago. And the second image is one of me in the State Library of Victoria in the Family Programs Unit, where I looked after the family programs and the Centre for Youth Literature. And this image that I have using the great Alison Lester's picture book, Are We There Yet?, to illustrate the fact that for me, yes, I'm there yet. That was the day I became a citizen of Australia. So the power that we can have in stories is just fundamental, and I've been very privileged to represent that across several countries. So let's get into what's happening here in Australia. Australia Reads is the national body for reading. It is a consortium. We are a coalition, really. It is the publishers, the authors, the libraries, educators, teacher librarians, book lovers, book clubs. It's all of us together, really, looking at how we can be a loud voice to say, reading is wonderful, reading is important, reading brings us benefits, and we need greater investment in reading. So we focus on research, what works, why does it work, how can we learn from it, how do we analyze it, how do we make it easy for others to use? How do we advocate strongly and loudly that reading is essential and needs support? How do we look at how we change the hearts and the minds of the public? How do we make it easier to engage with reading, especially for those who aren't very engaged in stories at present? And what are the programs, events, and resources that we offer? And so you can head to our website and get a glimpse of some of those. And the reason that we do it, all these social titles you can download from our website, is because reading brings such fundamental benefits to both ourselves as individuals and also to our society at large. So whether we're bonding with a book at bedtime, whether it's helping us to calm down, to process the world, I'm not sure if you noticed, the world is quite busy at the moment. Having the moments to slow down, to read considered words, to relax, to entertain ourselves, more important than ever. So those benefits that come from reading include things like health benefits, both physical and mental. The physical health benefits come from that concentration, that needing to take a deep breath, to slow down, to read the words, to process, or to listen to the words. That brings your heart rate down, it brings your blood pressure down. It's proven to have this important physiological impact, which that contributes to supporting a decrease in anxiety, along with the mental health benefits being from the content itself. To see yourself and some struggles, to see yourself reflected in a story can really help you feel less alone and can also decrease anxiety. So there are many health benefits. There are many benefits of anti-loneliness, of connection with others. You are much more likely, I haven't got the stat on the screen, but you are 53% more likely to be, 57% more likely to be empathetic and tolerant of others if you read on a regular basis, because you read from different narrations, you read from different perspectives, you are understanding how to walk in another's shoes. And that kind of connection piece comes through really strongly as a benefit. That sense that you can understand the world around you, but that you can understand your family. You can understand how to talk to one another. You can share special time. A book can provide that moment that supports a conversation, that can just support closeness. So these are incredible benefits. And then beyond them at a social level, we're also, we know that a little more literate nation means that we have better opportunities in life. We're more likely to be economically successful. We're more likely to have stable lives. We're more likely to pass that on to the next generation. And for young people, those who choose to read on a regular basis for themselves, for fun, outside of study, those who choose to read have better life outcomes, regardless of their parents' education level and regardless of their socioeconomic background. So if you read, you have better life opportunities. So that's the kind of crucial driving factor of why we do this. And when I say reading, I'm very broad in our definition, and the research often uses different methodologies. So whenever Australia uses the words reading, we mean across formats. We mean all long form reading, whether that's poetry, plays, graphic novels. We include reading digitally on a digital screen. We also include audiobooks, because when you're listening to an audiobook, you're getting all of the grammar structures, you're getting the vocabulary, you're getting the complexity of the written word and the nuance coming through. And so you still pick up many of the benefits that the research has examined. So I have to start the presentation by going into a little bit of doom and gloom, but I promise that there are beacons of hope, and we will talk about practicalities. The situation currently in Australia, but also around the Western world, is such that reading for pleasure and engagement with reading is dropping, and it's dropping quite quickly. That is the case for all age groups, but it's particularly prevalent for young people. So participation in reading has dropped down to 72%. There's going to be a new study coming in the next few months, and we'll see how these rates are holding. But it is a marked trend of decline. And there was some data out of South Australia's university just a couple of months ago that showed that for teenagers, 52.6% of South Australian teens did not read or listen to one book in a year. 25% of Australian kids don't get a bedtime story. And we're seeing that younger parents who perhaps didn't have it modeled for them are not passing on the pattern. So getting access to the knowledge that it's important to do, it's not scary, and how to practically read together as a family is really important, because the students that are going to be coming to you might not have had that grounding. Those teenagers, we've always known that there's a summer slump. We've always known that age 14, 15 is a kind of difficult moment. We're starting also to see a point at around age 7 or 8 where there's another slump kind of being represented in the data. So we're seeing a couple of declines. For young people, for teenagers, they are much more likely to be lifelong readers if they enjoyed reading prior to that slump. So they do come back to it. So if they were regular readers who were comfortable, even if they stop for a little while, they do return. They're way more likely to return if we set up the right conditions for them. So that is hopeful. So there are millions of young people who are reading, at least to some level, with some frequency, which is a good news story. We very much want to get to those, that 30%, or in the case of South Australia, more than 50% of young people who aren't reading, and turn that tide around. But the good news is that Australians want to read more, which is incredibly heartening, because there are industries all around the world that don't have that wonderful starting base. If you think about what would be a good example, perhaps fossil fuels or tobacco. These are industries that come from a negative starting point. They're not good for us, and everybody knows it. Whereas with books, people know that they're great for us. They understand implicitly that reading is a wonderful thing. They, broadly speaking, enjoy it. They're just not doing it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is how we overcome that particular hurdle. So people want to do it. How do we tap in? It's about understanding what's actually getting in their way. So we hear all the time, and I'm sure you do too, or you think it yourself. I certainly think this. I don't have time to read. I don't have headspace. And in fact, it's not quite the case at a societal level, because we have an enormous amount of recreational time. It's just not in uninterrupted blocks anymore. It's 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, or it is a good 3 hours. We're just getting pinged and notified and distracted all over the place. That means that we struggle to work out how we're going to fit reading in. We struggle to concentrate. The distraction is there, and we maybe go towards a slightly easier form. It's much easier to sit in Netflix, and the autoplay function happens. You don't even have to make a decision. You don't even have to press a button. They've done it all for you. You just, all of a sudden, 3 episodes have gone by, 3 hours have passed. So the world has been set up for other things to be easier. And we've got to think about how we can find a way to support people to choose reading in these moments. There are also issues around not knowing how to find books, which is a skill that I will talk about, and not having confidence. And confidence has come up again and again and again as a critical barrier. People don't feel like they're a reader. They don't feel like they are a good reader. And so we need to break down those barriers about what a good reader really is, because all reading is good reading, and anyone who reads is a reader. Anyone who runs is a runner as well. And I'm fairly sure that some of you out there are going to be runners. And you'll be nodding along going, no, running is wonderful and it gives me endorphins and I feel fabulous. And that is not me. Running is vile. I do not understand why people do it. It makes me hot and sweaty. I don't feel good. These mythical endorphins never arrive. I don't understand why anybody would want to run for fun. I get that it's good for us. I should probably be doing it. I'm not going to be one of those people who's joining the park run is for everyone. It's not for me. Now, I would like to say that I love Parkrun as an organization. I think they do incredible things in terms of bringing the community together. But I look at a statement like that, where running is for everyone, and just think, no, not for me, because I'm overwhelmed. I don't run at all. And so where do I even start? Well, just putting on a pair of trainers is a big deal for me. Tying my shoelaces, going for a walk around the block, that would be a start. Doing a park run, running a marathon, that is a lot to ask when I'm not doing it at all. But how do I even get hold of a pair of trainers? I go to the shop and it's just complete overwhelm. Everybody's 20 years younger than me. There's neon everywhere. Everything's $200. It's completely different. I have no idea what I need. I turn around, I walk out of the shop. I wish I hadn't even stepped foot in there. Now, I labor this point and this example because this is how others feel about books and reading and the choice and what are they even supposed to do and what is their way in. And if you are a runner, think of a different example. There will be other worlds that are uncomfortable for you, where you don't know the rules, you don't know the systems. And as a result, it's much easier to be choice overwhelmed and just go, nope, not for me. So if we apply that to a reading concept, we've got to think about ways that we can actually provide a supportive environment that is going to overcome this gap. And we've done a lot of work with behavioral scientists at Monash University's Behavior Works. And so many of these behavioral insights come from the work that we've done with them around the fact that people want to do something, they know it's good for them, they're not doing it. It's called the intention behavior gap. And there are ways that we can use science to nudge people to overcome this gap. Because all of those barriers that I was talking about, they all fall into, broadly speaking, 3 different buckets. We've got the capability problems. Now, that is the technical skill of literacy. So absolutely, that is about the decoding. That is about the learning of the words. And that is all those kind of hard technical literacy skills. But it's also the psychological barriers. And this is where confidence sits and comes in about whether people feel they can do something. Do they even believe that it's possible for them to be a reader or a good reader? And how do we bolster confidence as part of those capability barriers? Then there's opportunity. If someone does kind of maybe feel like reading, have they got a book in that moment? The moment where they are weak and they are malleable, we can get to them. There's a story just for them. We know it. Is the book there in that moment? Is the book on the bedside when they're sleepy and they want a story? Is there an audio book on their headphones ready to go? Have they got a story in their school bag so they can read it on the bus or in the car? What are the ways that we can increase access and increase opportunity so that at the right moment, when someone's ready to read, the book is there? And then there's motivation. And we hear quite a lot, and I'll hear from students, oh, I just don't feel in the mood to read. I don't want to. There's nothing I like. And I would refute that by saying, well, there's not only is there a book for every mood, a book can change your mood. What sort of mood do you want to be in? So I'm thinking about different ways that we can motivate students at different life stages with ways into books that are not about the book itself, but maybe about the feeling the book will give us, maybe about our life will get from learning about that topic or enjoying those dragons in that book, peer discourse. So those are the kind of three core barriers. And what we've done is unpick that with the Behaviour Works team. And we launched this report last year called Understanding Australian Readers. Now, the report is focused on age 16 plus, but many of the techniques and certainly the systems are applicable for all readers, particularly those who are more autonomous when they're getting to age 11, 12. And they're absolutely applicable to the parents, the staff, the school community that sit around the student and that are so important in modeling and bolstering reading behaviour. So this report is freely available on the Australia Reads website. And what it talks about is really the fact that reading isn't one thing. So a little bit like me not being able to start from scratch and going to parkrun, I need a few walks around the block first. There's a whole range of different decisions that come in the process of reading. And broadly speaking, those kind of bluey purpley colors are about finding and discovering books, and the pinky red yellow ones are about planning to read and discussing it. So right there at the very start of the journey, finding books that you might want to read. You can't do the rest of the journey unless you have a book. You can't read a book you don't have. So these are really critical moments in this sort of sequence of decision making, really. That decisions that have to be made. What book? Where can I find a book I might want to read? How do I choose which of the three in front of me I'm going to read? How did I even get access to it? Do I understand how libraries work? Have I ever been in a bookshop? Do I know what styles of books I can get hold of? Am I aware of e-readers and audiobooks? How do I find time in the schedule, not just once, but multiple times so that I can keep reading? And how do I build that as a habit that is really easy? It's not something I feel like is eating my vegetables. It's something that's already adding on to my daily life and habits. And then how do we talk about it? Because not everyone is comfortable or even feels that they're very good. And again, the confidence factor about reflecting and sharing on books. Because this journey isn't linear, it's happening all over the place for everyone, all at the time, at different times. But that social interaction, that I read this amazing book, when you've had that conversation with a student, or they've had it with you, and you found a book that one of you loved, when you ask someone about a book they love, they light up. Like the eyes get bigger. There is such joy, and you cannot shut them up normally. They really want to tell you about the dragons or the seahorses or the lighthouses or whatever was in that book, or the emotions that they felt, or how much, if they were teenagers, they wanted to cry at a camera and put it on the internet because the book moved them that much. Those social interactions are as much a part of reading as the sitting silently part. But there are lots of different kinds of readers. So we need to know that people are at different stages. The ones that are avid readers is where we often end up putting most of our attention because they're keen, but they're actually fine. We need some core support mechanisms and some great frameworks so that they can keep reading and exploring their reading identity, but they're pretty much fine. Engaged readers are also fairly comfortable with reading, but they struggle more to fit it in. There are more barriers around time and distraction for them. But then we get into the interesting segments. Our ambivalent readers don't even really know if they like reading or not. They don't know if they like fiction or non-fiction. They haven't really explored. They haven't had tasters. They haven't had a supported environment where they feel safe to try things out, and a lack of pressure around it's okay if you put things down, if things aren't for you. They need that explicit permission. So they need help to understand what it is that they like, but they're willing to do it and they like it. They are reading. They just need some more support. Our aspirational readers love reading, but they do it real confidence issues. They're really struggling. We need to look at the ways that we can use that confidence and enthusiasm that they have for books and getting them creating the habits in the daily routine that can support them to actually do it and push back against those distractions. And then we have our lapsed readers and our uninterested non-readers. Now, these two groups, neither of them read, or at least neither of them have read in the last 12 months. Possibly they were aspirational or engaged readers, and at the moment there's other things going on in their life and they haven't read. For students, it might be exams. It might be there's a lot of family stuff going on right now. It might be that there's a part-time job for the older ones. There could be an awful lot going on, too much sport, lots of travel. That means that they just haven't been fitting reading in lately. The difference is that these lapsed readers can remember positive experiences with books. Our uninterested non-readers, 0% of them can recall one positive experience with a book. Now, that doesn't mean that they haven't had one. It means they can't remember them. And I think it speaks very much to the critical work that you are doing with students directly to make sure that there are positive experiences. Because once they enter this uninterested category, they're completely disconnected. And the emotions that have come through in the research are things to do with frustration, anger, fear. Books are not for them, and they're quite ingrained in that space because there's no hope to fall back on. They don't remember that moment of reading together at bedtime with the family. Whereas our lapsed readers, they do. So they're more likely to come back because they know that there's a payoff for them. They understand that it has an emotional resonance. We just need to support them to do it. And that being said, this is a lot. And in that report, what we've done is we've taken each of those 6 groups and we've gone across the reading journey and we've looked at where are the problems, at what stage? Is it to do with finding books? Is it to do with confidence? So that we can really hone in and target helping our students overcome those particular barriers. But we've also got the drivers in there, the opportunity, what lights them up, what we don't have to focus on because they're already there. And we've done that for each stage of the journey, and that's all in the Understanding Australian Readers report for you to look at your leisure. But I'm going back to those uninterested non-readers for a moment because they're there in the classroom, they're there in the library, and we still have to find ways to engage them as well as those who are more open to it. The stats here are from the Deakin teen reading research report that came out in, I think, 2022, 23, that was specifically looking at non-readers age 12 plus and what they said about reading. And it's really interesting to look at, again, that correlates with all the other research about what the barriers are. But again, that I'm not very good, reading's not fun, I don't like it, the frustration comes through. So how do we make it fun? And how do we take the pressure off them and think about the reading journey? So let's not get them running a marathon or a 10K or a park run. Let's think about how we can embed book culture for these and the other groups who are reading infrequently or not at all. How we show that it doesn't have to be an hour of silent reading at home to be valuable and beneficial. It could be writing the shelf talker for the school library for other students. So you're not doing it for you, you're doing it for the grade 2s. What did you love in grade 2? What would you like the grade 2s to be reading if you're a grade 6 right now? What are other, how do we involve students in the buying decisions for the school library, for example? How do we involve them in the shelving, in what gets to be front-faced and what gets to be shelved by spine? How do we, in the classroom, is there a moment of choice that we can bring in? Is there an opportunity to, again, lower that pressure and think about, well, the students that can't sit still, the students that want to talk about books, is there a slightly different activity we can do that is still part of the reading journey? The books are still there and present, but we're building comfort with those books as entertainment, not as pressure. So the Deakin Teen Reading Report is a really huge study of, I think, 12,500 young people from across Australia, and really looks at how they are preferring to interact, what their communication styles are. And that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot. What is happening, even though with the social media ban has come in, what we have already seen, though, is a distinct change in the communication styles of young people who have been exposed to digital media, whether they're on social media or not, in that they don't want to do reviews that are written 3-paragraph reviews and are proper. They want to cry at a camera. They want to do a soundtrack. They want to do a Pinterest board, which makes me sound like a dinosaur because no one uses Pinterest under 30 anymore. But they want to have these different ways of responding and showing their peers that they're responding to book content that just look really different from traditional methods. And we need to be open to that and lean into it. There's lots of ways that these young people do discover books. The finding an author that they like is the most powerful way. But also powerful influences. Look at that, recommendations from family, recommendations from friends. The adults around us, and as we know, peer influence, incredibly huge and important. But I think the recommendations from trusted adults, from family, is often underplayed as to how powerful that is. And what if you come from a reading home, you value it, you see others doing it, it's modeled around you, you're more likely to uptake those recommendations. So what can we be doing to encourage the parent cohort to be backing up what we're doing in the classroom? There's also a fantastic report called The Decline of Volitional Reading that's from a multi-country team led by Professor Chinny Low from Singapore and Professor Teresa Kremen from the UK and Laura Scholes from ANU here in Australia, Sarah McGowan from Edinburgh. So it's really looked at the myths around reading, such as boys don't read, and unpacked what the data tells us and ways to approach it. And these are the kind of principles. And again, across all the research we've done here in Australia, these principles really form what I call the reading recipe that can help us engage students at different stages of the reading journey, the reading recipe. So access to books that reflect their own, a young person's own experience. So whether that is books in mother tongue, whether that is books that represent working class life, whether that's books that represent families that look like mine, is there access to a wide range of types of stories, whether that's being formally taught or is just on display in the classroom? It's something that could be picked up quietly when no one else is looking. It's something that is on the digital screens in the school, is something that is book of the month in the school newsletter. How can we make sure that we say these values are important by displaying these beautiful book covers, by showing that these stories are important and relevant? And we've got to think about how many barriers are in the way to picking up that book. So again, that's me going into the trainer shop. I've got to get to the city. I've got to find the shop. I've got to be terrified by the neon. I've got to be brave enough to go across the threshold. I have to speak to a sales assistant. That's 6 barriers. In a school environment, in a public library environment, do you have to be a member of the library? Do I know if I have to be a member of the library? How many steps does it take me to join the school library? You have to go in. That's a barrier. That's a step. What if the books, you didn't have to go through that barrier? What if the books were in the classroom and you were walking past them every day anyway? What if they were in the lobby? Just the small examples to think about. How do we, again, remove the friction points? And really, even just us going through the process of how many steps does it take for a student to get that book can help us reduce those number of steps and reduce that friction, and that increases access. And then we come to agency and choice, and I'm sure we all know that how important a young person having this sense of agency, whatever their age, is in their sense that they have buy-in and ownership, that this is something that is theirs and that they believe in. So whatever that next great read is, doesn't matter. I might not think it's the world's greatest book, but I'm going to do my absolute damnedest to make sure that that is not visible on my face, that I do not raise an eyebrow involuntarily, that I don't use the word just. It's just a graphic novel. All of this kind of slightly diminishing language is tiny and micro and picked up on instantly by young people, and it says that's not valuable, and that's the point they start to shrink and withdraw. So kind of thinking about that can be difficult, especially when a parent cohort isn't backing you up, and they want them to read the classics or come and read a good book, but really thinking how we can support and validate the young person's choice, because if they read what they love, they're going to do more of it. And the more of it they do, the more will they build to read, the more skill and technical skill, and the more likely they are to develop that skill. So coming in from enjoyment and fun is so important. And you'll find some weird books. They will start to trust you to tell you about some really odd books. And I've had some great recommendations of some books that I would never have read that have come from young people that have been in my class. And the way the world is working around multi-format storytelling is quite significant these days. There may be a book, there may be a soundtrack, there may be a K-pop demon hunter, there may be an animation, there may be a video game, all built in the same world, the same characters. They are familiar, they are safe. They already know part of the story. So it's a way to bolster confidence is that they're engaging with other parts of the story. And then if they want to know what happened to that character, well, it's the last 3 chapters of the book. Try this out and you can get the rest of the story. One thing I will mention is that choice overload is also a thing. So there's this balancing that we have to do as the adults there who are scaffolding and supporting this to say not too many choices. So somewhere between 2 and 5 is normally the sweet spot. Over 5 and you're like that wall of overwhelming spines and you just have no idea. And browsing is also a skill. So those of us who are avid readers and engaged readers and are familiar with browsing as a skill, our subconscious automatically tells us that font, that jaggy font on the edge with black and purple and red, that's probably a horror book. Hate those, not for me, move on. And that is a split-second decision in our brain. But that has to be taught. So how, if you're not getting that by osmosis by going to the library as a 4-year-old, as a 5-year-old, as a 12-year-old, then we need to be more explicit about tasting, trialing, testing books. Can we have taster sessions where we have 10 out? Can we teach explicitly what genre is? Genre is jargon. People do not know what genre is. That's a barrier. So is the word science fiction. People don't know what that is. That's UFOs, or is it lightsabers? Like, can we find more approachable ways to help and support the development of this complex literacy around font choice, reading fonts, reading book covers, and taking in those visual cues that tell us what we're going to experience when we read the book. Routines, really crucial, how we make time for it. And I know this is a sore spot and a difficult one in the school environment, in a packed curriculum, to find ways to make time for reading. It's amazing if you can make time for quiet reading itself. It's fabulous if you're able to make space for a reading aloud for 10 minutes to the class. That's incredibly powerful, but it's not always possible. So what are other ways that we can build it in, even if it's, a 2-minute choice? You have I'm just thinking like a board beside the classroom wall where you can say what I'm reading in the bus home, or just small activities where people can visibly display their intention to read. Also setting a time in the schedule at home, just as we do for homework, just as we do for sport, and that will be different for different families. It might be the best thing that you put on an audiobook in the car and listen together and then talk about it. It could be that you're a bedtime reader. Me, the book falls on my face within about 8 seconds of having gone to bed. Not the best time to read. For me, it's getting up and having a breakfast reading session that's more effective. So just thinking about what that is. And holiday downtime for parents, students, staff is a fabulous time. So what's the reading intention? What's the plan that you can support students going into holiday time for reading? And that's not about the volume of what they're reading. It might be, did you find 3 books that made you laugh? And trying to find ways to lean into the emotion and the interest and the entertainment that will keep them as lifelong readers, rather than the volume of books that they've read or the complexity of books that they've read. Also very important to think about rereading. Now, I know we always want to kind of extend students and make sure they're reading something else as well, as opposed to just Diary of a Wimpy Kid for the 5th time, or just another copy of Are We There Yet by Alison Lester for the 19th time. Repetition is important, as we know, for kind of language development, but it's also a safety mechanism. So we can do a yes and model. Yes, we can have that book, and let's try this other one at this just before we go into our comfort read. So thinking about those kind of personal connections are really important, and are we supporting students to have the conversations about how they talk about books? How do they reflect on, does that kid sound like me? Does that family sound like me? Is there any, can we help them identify correlations with their own life? That reflection is really valuable. That social aspect is really valuable, whether that's adult to child or peer to peer, or older child to younger child. And that can be a lovely one for story time, as the older students reading to the younger students can be great. Positive experiences, reader identity, we've set a really high bar. Those of us who love reading, I mean, I purposefully, as the head of Australia Reads, don't have a wall of books behind me, because it really kind of reinforces, well, that's what a reader looks like. I have the perfect bookshelf. I unbox books. I have the pin badges. I've got the tote bag. And what that says is I'm in the club. And that is fantastic. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that for those that are in the club, but the very nature of a club means that there are people who are not in the club. And that is reinforced for 60% of Australians who aren't reading regularly, that they're not in the club. So how do we, again, reduce those barriers and think about different ways that you can reflect that you're a reader? We have people say to us quite often, oh, I'm not a reader. I only read 1 or 2 books last year. Then you're a reader. That's amazing. Can we get those readers to do the displays in the library? Can we get them to make the posters for the classroom that's about the book that they love? How can we bring that forward so that we open up and expand that concept of what a reader identity really is? And I keep making this point around how we make reading visible and how powerful you are in that process. Even if you're not actually reading, but if there's any way you could just be looking like you're reading a book when they're coming into class, finding ways to have it on the digital screens. And do you have a little library at the gate? Can you chalk poetry on the walk that the kids have from where they're dropped off into the building? Can they do that for you? That could be a project. What quotes are they going to pick? Who are they by? Why are they choosing those ones? How will they design them? Will there be illustrations? So really thinking about how we can bust out of bookish spaces. And the more that school leadership, I know this doesn't work for everyone, but school leadership incredibly powerful in just saying, this is important. And we say this is important not by using those words, but by behavior and actions. The behavior is a language. And if we have on the screen before assembly starts, this is what Mr. Devlin, the PE teacher, is reading right now. Or if we have a display once a month, this is what an adult in our community who we trust and respect, this is what the sports coach, the scout leader is reading right now. These are really powerful ways to model. Have you got a parent group who's championing reading who can help you with these ideas? Can you mobilize them and engage them? Like I said, more than half of Australians want to read more. We believe in reading. The group is there to be mobilized. It's how we mobilize them to help us, help the kids. So getting those parents reading, having the books in the home. A lot of parents don't understand how important it is to do this modeling. Most parents stop reading with their children when they're about age 7 or 8, as soon as they acquire technical literacy. And they don't understand that 86% of kids up to the age of 17 wish their parents did still read with them. So kind of getting this point across that the parents have such a high opportunity to influence their children gaining those incredible benefits of health, longevity, long-term success by being lifelong readers, and that it starts by having fun with books. And actually, parents get a bit stressed sometimes because they think they have to do the voices. They do not have to do the voices. If you choose to do a 10-minute reading along in class, you do not have to do the voices. Very cool if you do, but you could maybe nominate a kid to do a voice each. There are other ways. And bringing authors into schools is really wonderful and really valuable. If you can do that, we run a program called Lit Up that we're piloting in New South Wales and Queensland. There are ways to get authors into schools. There are different styles of school authors visit. This is Nat Amor. She will rock your school. The entire community will be cheering her on and laughing, and everyone will know about it she's a rock star for weeks. Or you can have a more quieter animation-based author come and speak. You can have someone do workshops, someone talk about illustration that are still fun and entertaining, but bring a huge amount of value for different kinds of literacies as well. And thinking about which authors are relevant for your cohort. Maybe you have a high First Nations population and you want to have more a First Nations author come and speak to the whole community. Maybe you want someone from a different cultural background. You want someone who writes fun and humor books. There's so many options out there. And we have a directory on our website where you can look for different kinds of authors for different sorts of age ranges. And then a few top tips on opportunities because we're coming close to question time. And thinking about those curations, who is doing it? Who is speaking in the curation? Is it the adults, or have the students had opportunity to recommend books to each other in written form, in spoken form, giving books to one another? Do they have input into the purchasing decisions? Do they have input into displays? This is kind of a summary of all the kind of things I've been talking about with you today. I'm thinking about the physical space and how you design that into your building if you can. Can you make books obvious from the very start of the moment a student interacts with school? Can you think about furniture placement, furniture that is in a circle? The students will talk to one another. Furniture that is pointing at a window or a wall, they were more likely to do a solo activity like sit and read a book. Is the lighting warm or is it harsh? All of these things can genuinely influence whether someone is likely to feel in the mood to read or not. What questions are we asking about what a student wants to read as we start to guide them to make choices, or even guide them to learn to talk about a book when we're discussing a set text? How do we ask open questions about and how do we show how do we understand what they're interested in and show interest in them, and then we recommend a book. So we don't go in with what we love, we start from what they love and we ask the open questions about what they enjoy, and then we find a book to fit. And the practicality is really important. I think there's a study out that says half of students don't know, the older students don't know how to use the technical systems. They don't know how to use like Libby or BorrowBox because you need how-to steps. You need and one of the things that has come out of our recent research is how much we need practical guides of how to. How do I choose a book? How do I use Libby? How do I get an ebook? What to expect? The more we can kind of use social stories really to show the expectation and the step-by-step guide, the more likely they are to actually do it. There's also ways that we can think about, this is very behavioral science now from our lead researcher, Dr. Brianna Wright, but really thinking about rather than trying to get someone to read when they've been doing a totally different activity in a different class, perhaps, immediately preceding yours, how do we switch headspaces? And sometimes it's about just nudging them across. Oh, you've been doing quiet study. You probably need a palate cleanser. You need a 5-minute break. Here's a quick read or a verse novel or a poetry. Here's a short story just to clear your brain and back again. If you love music, fantastic. What else are you doing in the music world? What are you listening to? What playlist are you making? What have you got? What are you listening to with a bedtime story? Okay, and here's a book about that. So we get them in the moment of excitement where they're talking about something they love, and we slip the book in. We say, try this. And one final element I can't stress enough is supportive messaging. We have to be incredibly explicit about validating all reading is good reading. Doesn't matter what it's not that it doesn't matter. See, I just diminished reading there accidentally in my language, in my own language. Every format we read is wonderful. It all brings us benefit and joy. Multi-format access is fabulous. Our reading ability will change over time. We will have less time, more time. The amount we read will change. That's okay. Come back in, restart reading with me. So just how we start to build the habit slowly rather than expecting a step change in a very short period of time. And so there we have the reading recipe. In our school, reading is visible, it's positive, it's open to everyone and inclusive, it's relevant, it enables our students, and it's easy. And we've done the hard work of thinking through what easy means for my student cohort. And so it's easy for them, not for me. And this is the reading recipe. So you can keep in touch with us through our newsletter, which goes out about once a month, including tomorrow. And we put out all the latest kind of research. There is a new piece of research coming out from Creative Australia very soon, specific to 2 to 15-year-olds and their participation more broadly, both in literature but across the arts, which is very exciting and something we lobbied hard for. And now I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. Do you know what I really want to do? I just want to go off now and Maybe make myself a nice warm drink and like sit down and read a book. But I think, we've had some great chats where you were presenting and people were recommending books that work with like different like kids and different age groups and everything. So thank you everyone who participated as well. I know that you've touched on this. We did get a really interesting question just around audiobooks, which I know that you sort of, you've mentioned too. Yep, they're just another part of the media of like what the book form is, etc., etc. But um, do you have anything more you could say about audiobooks and just as legitimate
Yeah,
as
well, they are incredibly fast growing. So 1/3 of Australians have listened to an audiobook in the last 12 months.
mm,
That number is growing stratospherically. The Scandinavian countries, who we often look to as kind of literacy high points because they have such high levels of literacy, is the home of many of the audiobook platforms, intensely popular in those countries. We expect that trajectory to continue growing. So people want audio content. It allows you to experience a book when you're doing something else, which is both useful in terms of an emotional regulation and a physical regulation thing. You don't have to sit silently or still, but it is also useful. People say they like doing the household chores now because there's an
yeah.
audiobook going on. We also hear that for adults, for parents who are driving while listening, they sometimes get a little bit worried because you're like, I just blanked out on the last 5 kilometers because I was so into the book. So it's very engaging. The styles, the publishers are putting a lot of funding and money into audiobooks, so the production
Mm,
quality is changing. So I think we're seeing a couple of different types of audiobook styles. We're seeing the very simple one narrator who you can build a bit of a bond with because the voice, you might actually choose a book based on who the narrator is, not just the author. And that's
mm,
another way into reading. It's another way to trial different books because you've got a familiar voice that feels safe to you and you enjoy listening to, that can give you tasters of different things. But we're also seeing the highly produced version that's really a radio play style, where there's 10 or so Shanglu's Whitewash won audiobook of the year a couple of years ago. That's got a cast of 21 actors from all
mm.
different backgrounds and walks of life, and that's amazing production values. So there's lots there. But the research in terms of their reading and linguistic benefits is out of the University of Oxford. And it
Right.
talks very much about um, the, well, all of the research actually talks about the greatest benefits come from the reading of print books, followed by the reading of digital books, followed by audiobooks, but they're all still very high in terms of their literacy outcomes because you're getting that grammatical complexity, the narration complexity, and you're at the same time building confidence. Um, I think we'll see an increasing amount as well of read alongs, where people are listening to the audiobook and reading the text at the same time, and there are actually physical products being developed that are doing that. So I think we'll see enormous growth in this, and it's going to happen without us. So let's make sure it happens well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Now I know there was some librarians too that have attended the webinar, and I was just wondering if you could, you've got anything more that you wanted to add around the importance of school libraries and public libraries. And I know that you've just been to a conference this
Yes,
week,
I've
so
just been at Alia National, so I've just spent and also a teacher librarian conference in New South Wales. So I've just been hanging out with 800 librarians and school librarians. One of the things that we've got an opportunity at the moment for anyone watching live is the National Cultural Policy is open for submissions. On our website, we have put template submissions that you can cut and paste. Um, the submissions are open until Sunday. Please put in a submission to say that reading in school libraries are important. One of our recommendations is that the Australian government mandate a library in every school with professional staff and collection budgets. This is a genuine opportunity that we are being asked by the federal government what we want to see in a cultural policy. And we want massive, large scale reading campaigns, reading integration, but we need the infrastructure. That includes public and school libraries. Let's go tell the feds. We've made it easy for you by doing templates. You've got till Sunday. Please put in an application.
I love it. Well, I think that was it. I mean, really, the chat's just filled with thank yous and support. Thank you for sharing the messages and they've great ideas for assembly, for example. So that's really fantastic. So, oh, and someone said, where do we find the applications for the submission? So that's via your website, isn't it? Which
Yes,
we,
I'm
yep,
pretty sure it's still on the homepage of our website.
I've got that open. Let me have a look.
You can go in, and there should be on the homepage a bit that says National Cultural Policy. So
Yes.
australiareads.org.au,
What
National
I'll
Cultural
do is
Policy.
I've got that now.
There
I'll
it
pop
is. It's
that
on
in
the
the chat.
homepage. If you click that and scroll down, it has got all the templates and the button to click as to where to put the submission.
Yeah, it's in the chat now. So
You can also read our full policy platform where we talk about all the things that are necessary to build this ecosystem, which includes that library support.
thank you so much, Anna, for your time. Is there anything else you want to say before we let you go and we let everybody go to enjoy their evenings?
Well, just thank you to Nelson Primary for kind of putting a spotlight in this and putting the attention on the fact that this is everyone has the opportunity to have an impact in this space, and we can have some fun while we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. And thank you to everybody who has attended. And we really appreciate your time, Anna. So thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.